Hell, in many religious traditions, the abode, usually beneath the earth, of the unredeemed dead or the spirits of the damned. In its archaic sense, the term hell refers to the underworld, a deep pit or distant land of shadows where the dead are gathered. From the underworld come dreams, ghosts, and demons, and in its most terrible precinct sinners pay, some say eternally, the penalty for their crimes. The underworld is often imagined as a place of punishment rather than merely of darkness and decomposition because of the widespread belief that a moral universe requires judgment and retribution. Crime must not pay. More broadly, hell figures in religious cosmologies as the opposite of heaven, the nadir of the cosmos, and the land where God is not. In world literature, the journey to hell is a perennial motif of hero legends and quest stories, and hell itself is the preeminent symbol of evil, alienation, and despair. Mesopotamia. Mesopotamian civilizations from the 3rd to the 1st millennium BCE produced a rich literature dealing with death and hell. Much of it designed to impress upon the hearer the vast gulf separating the living from the dead and the fragility of the cosmic order on which vitality and fertility depend. In Mesopotamian traditions, hell is described as a distant land of no return. A house of dust where the dead dwell without distinction of rank or merit, and a sealed fortress, typically of 7 gates, barred against invasion or escape. In a cycle of Sumerian and Akkadian poems, the god king Gilgamesh, despairing over the death of his companion Enkidu, travels to the world's end, crosses the ocean of death, and endures great trials only to learn that mortality is an incurable condition. Hell, according to the Gilgamesh epic, is a house of darkness where the dead drink dirt and eat stone. More details of this grim realm emerge in the poems about the Sumerian shepherd and fertility god Tammuz, Akkadian, Dumuzi, and his consort Inanna, Akkadian, Ishtar, who in her various aspects is the mistress of date clusters and granaries, the patroness of prostitutes and alehouses, a goddess associated with the planet Venus and spring thunderstorms, and a deity of fertility, sexual love, and war. Inanna is also the sister of Ereshkigal, queen of the dead. An impulsive goddess, Inanna, according to some versions of the myth, is said to have threatened, in a fit of pique, to crush the gates of hell and let the dead overrun the earth. In the poem Descent of Inanna, she sets forth to visit Ereshkigal's kingdom in splendid dress, only to be compelled, at each of the 7 gates, to shed a piece of her regalia. Finally, Inanna falls naked and powerless before Ereshkigal, who hangs her up like so much meat upon a drying hook. Drought descends upon the earth as a result, but the gods help revive Inanna, who escapes by offering her husband as a replacement. This ransom secures the fecundity of the earth and the integrity of the grain stores by reinforcing the boundary between hell and earth. It is the better part of wisdom, the tradition suggests, for mortals to make the most of earthly life before they are carried off into death's long exile. Iranian and Zoroastrian eschatology. Among the Aryan peoples who migrated to the Iranian plateau in the middle of the 2nd millennium BCE, a priestly sacrificial religion arose which held that the world is the field of incessant struggle between the Ahuras, gods of light, purity, and order, and the Devas, demons of darkness, pollution, and disorder. This dualist cosmology provided the foundation for Zoroastrianism, the prophetic religion of Zoroaster, before the 6th century BCE, which proclaimed the coming triumph of Ahura Mazda, wise lord, and his angelic retinue over Ahriman, destructive spirit, prince of the powers of evil. Zoroastrian end-time accounts describe the coming of one or more cosmic saviors, the resurrection of the dead, a final passage through purgatorial rivers of molten metal, and a resounding defeat of all the demonic powers. The Zoroastrian hell is presided over by Yima, the first victim of death, and is home to all that is evil, dark, corrupt, cold, and hostile to life. The demons who dwell there take delight in torturing sinners, but since evil is destined to be utterly vanquished, hell itself will be destroyed with the restoration of Ahura Mazda's good creation. During the interval between death and resurrection, there is a preliminary judgment in which the dead have their deeds weighed in a balance. At the time of judgment, the dead confront their conscience in personified form on a symbolic bridge, from which they fall into hell to be tortured, pass to heaven for blissful reward, or enter the limbo-like realm of the mixed, which is reserved for those of neutral merit. In the influential 9th century Apocalypse, Artaxerxes, an Iranian priest, takes a visionary tour of these otherworldly realms and returns with a harrowing report: the torments of hell, even if not eternal, are dreadful enough to have a powerful deterrent effect. Egypt. The tombs, pyramids, and necropolises of ancient Egypt attest to an extraordinary concern for the state of the dead, who, in sharp contrast to Mesopotamian belief, are described as living on in a multiplicity of forms and locations suitable to their rank and worth, in or near the grave. In the desert regions of the west, in the fertile fields of Eru, in the heavens with the midday sun and circumpolar stars, or under the earth, where the sun travels by night. As the mortuary cult of Osiris developed and the prerogative of surviving death extended from royalty to common people, greater attention focused on the underworld. Texts such as the Book of the Dead, the Book of Amduat, and the Book of Gates exhaustively describe the perilous journey through the 12 zones of the underworld, corresponding to the 12 hours of night, and the harrowing judgment over which Osiris presides. The deceased needed both magical and moral power to be acquitted of offenses when appearing before Osiris. Elaborate ritual provisions were made, therefore, to translate the deceased from a mortal to an immortal condition. They included mummifying the body, adorning the tomb with prayers and offerings, and equipping the deceased with spells, amulets, and formulaic affidavits of innocence to win safe passage and ensure success at the divine tribunal. Those who succeeded won immortality by identification with Osiris or with the sun. Those who failed were devoured by a crocodile-headed monster, tormented by demons, or worse, yet rarely is there the suggestion of eternal condemnation. The tomb remained a place where the dead could be comforted or appeased by the living. And the mortuary texts were a constant reminder of the need to prepare for the final passage. Judaism. In the Hebrew Bible, Sheol, Shel, is a place of darkness, silence, and dust to which the spirit, or vital principle, descends at death. It is likened to a vast house whose entrance is guarded, like family burial sites, by gates and iron bolts, to a prison in which the dead are held captive by strong cords, to an insatiable beast with spreading jaws, and also to a watery abyss. Once in Sheol, the dead are cut off from their living kin and from cultic relationship to God. Yet God retains his sovereignty over Sheol, searching out the evildoers who hide in its depths, preserving or delivering the just from Sheol's grasp, and, ultimately, as later apocalyptic and rabbinic texts make explicit, restoring the dead to life. At least in the post-exilic portions of the Hebrew Bible, those written after the Babylonian captivity, death does not hold the same fate for all. The unjust, the improperly buried, and the untimely dead endure the misery of Sheol, but, for those who die in God's favor, the natural bitterness of death is mitigated by reunion with their ancestors. Late prophetic books, concerned with the vindication of God's justice, warn of a coming day of the Lord in which the wicked will be burned up like stubble. Malachi 4 verse 1. The corpses of God's enemies will suffer endless corruption. Isaiah 66 verse 24. And evildoers who have died will be resurrected to shame and everlasting contempt. Daniel 12 verse 2. While the just enjoy the fulfillment of God's promises. In some post-biblical Jewish writings, Gehenna, the incineration ground where children had once been sacrificed to the god Moloch, emerges as a realm of post-mortem punishment more like hell than Sheol. In Gehenna, the unjust dead would suffer a fiery torment of duration and severity proportionate to their crimes. During the period from the Maccabee Wars, 168 to 164 BCE, to the compilation of the Mishnah, early 3rd century CE, writers increasingly speculated about the afterlife, producing apocalypses that featured dramatic visionary journeys through heaven and hell. The First Book of Enoch, an important collection of pseudepigraphic revelations, describes in vivid detail both the eternal abyss of fire where fallen angels will be imprisoned after the final battle and the plague and pain to be visited upon wretched souls. At the same time, Jewish philosophers and mystics emphasized the spiritual character of the future life, interpreting Gehenna as a redemptive fire which burns away the soul's impurities in order to restore its original perfection. A spiritualized conception of the soul's journey after death flourished alongside the rabbinic doctrine of resurrection and judgment at the end of time, and the two models were often combined. The focus of traditional Jewish eschatology, now as in the past, is on the Messianic age, when the world will be remade into a dwelling place fit for the divine presence. To forfeit one's share in the world to come is the greatest of all calamities, to which hellfire, whether physical or spiritual, pales in comparison.